guys, today we're going to talk about the new Adeptus Custodes rules that we just previewed on Warhammer community, and let's see what the Golden Boys have in stock for us in 10th. First, the army rule. We have the new take on martial katas. So essentially it's a customizable fight phase buff that's named right after the buff that we had in the command phase in the 9th edition. So we only have 3 stances now instead of 6 that we used to have. And to be honest, we only used like 3 in 9th edition, so that's probably an optimal amount. We have 3 options to choose from in the beginning of the fight phase. At the start of the fight phase, we can turn on Captaris, Decatarai, and Rendex. So Captaris is our -1 to hit in melee buff. It's very strong, especially considering that the Custodes are incredibly resilient. Usually, if the game is in the correct state, Custodes are resilient and hard to kill. So anything that makes them even harder to kill usually goes a long way. Next, Decatarai is our exploding 6s to hit in melee. Very good. Custodes have very high damage attacks, usually very high quality. So anything that gives us a bit more of those is great. And finally, Rendex, probably my favorite one because it gives us critically important ability to wound any tough target automatically on 6s to hit. Very powerful, especially considering that spears are now confirmed at strength 7, so wounding monolith on 6s would be no fun at all, and now we can do that just by hitting on a 6. That rule is very strong also because we are selected at the start of the fight phase, so we can turn on in our opponent's fight phase if we're charged the Captaris stance to protect our assets, and then in our fight phase finish the job by choosing whichever stance is the best against the current units that your units are engaged with. And this rule applies to all of your units that have this ability, so it would be an army-wide buff. It's the Detachment Rule. So it's called an Aegis of the Emperor. It's a 4-up shrug against mortal wounds. It's effectively the latter half of the Emperor's Chosen Fighting Style rule that we had in 9th edition. 4-up shrug against mortals is a very weird sort of rule. It gives you a clear and powerful advantage against psychic heavy armies, anything that dishes out mortal wounds. But other than that, it's a big placeholder. You cannot benefit from that rule unless your opponent's army really gives out a lot of mortals, and I'm pretty sure that not all of the armies in the game are going to be doing that, and any buff that is situational is probably in like 99% of cases is going to be inferior to a buff that works all the time. So I would rather have something that would be universal, and that's why I'm glad that it's a detachment rule. It means that when the codex comes out, we can change that to something else. Everything is dependent on how common mortal wounds are going to be in 10th edition. If they're very common, then this rule is going to be awesome. If they're not that common, and like you sometimes can encounter an opponent who can do a lot of damage this way, sometimes you don't, then I would probably change it up. Obviously not a bad rule, any rule is good, anything that buffs up your army, but the problem is that you might have had something much better in this spot than the 4-up shrug against mortals. Especially with such a beautiful name, Aegis of the Emperor. It sounds so great. Sounds like a once per phase reroll of 1 save per squad. Something like that. That you are very lucky and the Emperor protects you. That's what I would love to see. Whereas the 4-up shrug seems like they're given with one hand and taken back with another. Now, let's focus on the data sheet. First, we'll talk about Trajan Valorous. I've expected him to be toned down because he was probably the best Imperium character in the entire game in 9th edition, and he was toned down, unfortunately. If you are a fan of Valorous like myself, then brace yourselves. Don't get me wrong, he's still a badass guy, but he's just not as cool as he was in 9th edition. In 9th edition, he was a powerhouse, he could do everything for us. He was literally a beatstick character, the best buffing character, and a distraction character, everything you wanted in one unit. Now, his aura is gone. He doesn't have an aura anymore. His aura used to be reroll once to hit and wound for core units within 6. Now he just buffs up a unit that he is the leader of, and a rule, I would call it don't care rule, because it allows you to essentially ignore anything that can be ignored by that squad. So any modifiers to hit, to wounds, any like battle shock tests, modifiers to your charge, anything that you want, you can ignore. It can be a very powerful buff, obviously, again, depending on what you're playing against. We don't really have the clearest picture at this moment of how important that role might be in 10th edition, because we don't have all the information yet. So I would keep this an open discussion for now, because saying that, oh no, it's not so good, because if we saw like rerolls or something like that, we would know what it means. In this case, we don't know how often you're going to encounter modifiers. At this moment, we've only seen a couple of like battle shock modifiers, which obviously that's great to be able to ignore that. But other than that, we'll just have to see. Moment Shackle is still great. You still can double your attacks. You have 6 attacks still. Unfortunately, Misericordia is not an extra attack as far as I can see. You don't even have Misericordia on the data sheet of Valoris, which is weird. I don't understand that. But in any case, you can double that to 12. You can fight first with him if you want to. So that's once per battle. You can select that in the fight phase. You used to be able to interrupt with him for free. Now it's a fight first ability. Hard to say how worse or better that is at the moment, because again, we don't have the full picture. I would say that probably is pretty much the same story that you used to have, so it's not a nerf really. Or you can turn on 2+ invulnerable save. That one I would say is probably closer to a buff, because yes, you could before ignore like 1 point of d6 plus 2 damage that would keep you alive, so you can zero out one single attack to damage 0. But now turning on 2+ invulnerable save on a character like that, for an entire fight phase, it can make him extremely tanky, especially with his 5-up shrug. So Moment Shackle is still very, very strong. Plus, we don't know anything about enhancements yet, so we don't know if named characters will be able to get like an upgrade, a Warlord trait, because Valoris used to have 2 Warlord traits, full rerolls to hit and melee, which we don't know if he has them or not anymore. He used to be able to heroically intervene 6 inches. Again, nothing, we don't see anything about that on his data sheet. He used to give us command points back on a 5-up. Again, nothing that we know about at the moment. I hope that he will get some of that back, because otherwise he would be literally half of what he was in 9th edition. He's T6 now, which is probably going to be the base toughness for Custodes now. It's almost the same as it was in 9th edition, to be honest, so I'm not saying that it's a buff. It's pretty much as it used to be. It's just there is a slightly wider gap now between Custodes and Space Marines, which is correct. Still has his 5-up shrug, but somehow only 7 wounds now, and his bolter is strength 5, AP 2, damage 3, which obviously is great. I'm not sure why they decided to buff his bolters so much and not buff the other bolters, but it's fine. Valoris deserves it. Let's talk about the Adeptus Custodians. They are my favorite Terminators in the entire game, and I was really looking forward to this rules update for them. They've lost an inch of movement. They are back to 5 inches, which is unfair in my humble opinion, because their suits in the lore are specifically designed to be mobile, unlike the Terminator suits of Space Marines. They don't restrict movement like the Terminator suit of the regular Marines. So why they decided to do that, I'm not sure. It's not breaking the game in any sense that they can move 5 inches. Maybe it has to do with the interaction with the new Land Raider. Maybe they didn't want us to be able to move 6 inches out of Land Raider and charge. If that is going to be the case, we still don't know if you can move after disembarking. So, yeah, that one is weird. Next, they are toughness 7 now, which I adore. I was really looking forward to them being toughness 6 in 9th edition. They skipped that in 9th edition, but finally, Adeptus Custodians are tougher than the regular Custodians in terms of their toughness characteristic, and that's awesome. It means that you need strength 14 to wound them on 2s, and strength 14 is not going to be on like every other unit, and there are melee weapons for infantry and a bunch of other things that are strength 5, 6, and now those things will need 5s to wound your LRs, which I love. Spears are now strength 7, AP 2, damage 2 is as expected, to be honest. Almost everything in the game lost a point of AP, so now they're just the same but minus 1 AP. Axes are finally damage 3. That's what I talked about so long in my videos about Custodes. I said that axes should be special because they should have damage 3. Now we have damage 3 on axes. Unfortunately, we don't have a minus 1 damage anymore, so I'm not sure that damage 3 is so important, especially considering that axes do one attack less than the spears, and they also suffer minus 1 to hit for their troubles. So I'm not sure now that you want to run with axes specifically. They are better for some cases, obviously, like for damage for 3 wound targets, but there's still an argument for using spears instead of them. Misericordia is a weird one, really weird, because as you can see, it doesn't have the extra attack rule, so we are essentially given a choice of using our spear, which is 7 minus 2, or our Misericordia, which is 5 minus 2. Why would you do that? I have no idea. The only explanation I have is they have just left this one to give the Vexillus Praetor, which is now a part of the data sheet for each unit, an ability to fight with something, because Alarus Vexillus Praetor doesn't have a spear with him. He just has a Misericordia. His other arm is free. And yeah, the Vexillus thing is lame in my humble opinion. I really like the idea of a separate character. Custodian's range is not that vast to try to eliminate, just simply get rid of a whole data sheet. And if instead of like dense cover, light cover, and extra attacks, all we get now is extra point of OBSEC, for the Vexillus, that's not what it was. That's not what it is in lore. In the lore, it's a very powerful transmitter of like all sorts of psychedelic and other frequencies that mess up with the opponent, and extra point of OBSEC is just lame. Another bad thing, and I promise it's the last one, the last bad thing, and then we'll come back to good things, is leadership. I don't get why Custodians have 6+ leadership, which is the same as Space Marines have. They are Custodians, they had leadership 11 in 9th edition. What changed? What scared them so much that they came back to the same leadership the Space Marines have? I don't understand that. There should be a difference between Custodes and Space Marines, and the difference between Custodes and Skitarii should be better than 1 point. That's just what I think. Let me know in the comments what you think. Their special rule, though, is very, very good. It's Slayer of Tyrants, gives you full rerolls to wound against characters, vehicles, and monsters. That immediately makes them great against tougher targets, especially if you turn on those martial katas to give you like exploding 6s or 6s to hit auto wound. They will be chewing through a lot of stuff, even when that stuff is much higher in toughness than their attacks are in strength. So the second ability is very strong in my opinion. So it gives you a chance to come back to reinforcements once per game in your opponent's movement phase. What it means essentially is if you've in your turn, if you've successfully like deployed your Alarus from Deep Strike, shot your guns, charged, killed a bunch of stuff, and if nothing is within engagement range of your units, you can send your Alarus back to reinforcements in your opponent's movement phase and do the same thing over again in your turn, which is wonderful. And if you did not succeed with the charge, at least you have a chance to save your guys and give them a second try to come back from reinforcements. That's great. Developers have promised to give us a set of these 2 rules for each data sheet, so every data sheet is going to have like a permanent rule that buffs the unit and a once per battle one, which you use in a very specific moment to help you guys out. I really like that approach. I think it's a good way to make Custodes stand out. Next, Sisters. They are largely the same. They're still battle line, so they will probably get some benefits because of that. We're not sure yet, because all these keywords that we have in the datasheet, they might activate their own like small rule that we just didn't see yet in the rulebook or maybe in the data cards somewhere. So we don't know what battle line does at this moment. They have OBSEC value of 2, so the same as Alaris, for example, which is nice. I don't know what their price is. They're probably going to be relatively cheap. They don't ignore psychic powers anymore. They just have a 3+ feel no pain against psychic powers. It's probably the first 3+ feel no pain I've seen in the game ever, not even like in 8th edition. That's very good, obviously, ignoring 66% of all your damage from the psychic attacks. Again, if the psychic attacks still work with the closest visible unit, that's going to be very useful. So you can just run your girls out in the front and make them take all the damage on themselves. I don't like that mechanic. I don't like Custodes sending out sisters into the front line to get killed by Psykers and Bolters and then walk through their bodies and kill the perpetrators. I would really much like them to work at a distance more. I know that probably is less efficient in terms of balance. It will be much harder to balance, but just from a standpoint of valor and courage, I think Custodes would not do that. Their bolters are sniper bolters against Psykers, so 6 to wound do mortal wounds, and well, instead of the damage. And they can target leaders of squads directly if they're Psykers. Nice to have, but unlikely to be very effective, because even 10 bolter shots, if you like have a 10-man squad, which you probably don't have, will not have, you'll probably do like 1 or 2 wounds to a character maximum, and that's if they don't have 2+ armor. If they have 2+ armor, you're probably not doing any damage to them at all, and so like, why do you even bother trying to shoot them? You probably will just keep them behind line of sight, standing on objective, as they were in 9th edition, as they probably stay for a long time until they come up with something really, really nasty. Which, talking about nasty, Executioner Great Blade is very nice. It's very nasty if you manage to send some girls charging against a Psyker, and it can be any Psyker, even a very tough one, because you have anti-Psyker 4+ rule, which allows you to auto wounds on 4s to wound. That's very strong, because those attacks are considered to be critical wounds, and those critical wounds will also do mortal wounds instead of the damage. So any 4+ to wound will essentially do 2 mortal wounds on the target, and the attack sequence ends. That's very strong. Problem is delivery. So how would you deliver those, like, even 10 girls with great blades into the fray so that they're not dead with the Rhino, but then after they disembark they cannot charge? So I'm not sure. Next thing is stratagem, Vigil Unending. One of the best stratagems I've seen so far in all of the previews. It's a flat-out revive a Custodian for 1 command point. If you have a dead Alaris in your squad, just 1 command point and he's not dead anymore. You use it in your command phase. It's a brilliant mechanic. I love the fact that they acknowledge that losing Custodians is awful, and you need to be able to preserve them as much as possible because you don't have many. And this is very, very powerful for 1 command point. The only limitation you have is that you cannot do that to the same squad over and over again, and you cannot revive characters inside squads, and characters in general. It's fine as long as you have a couple of squads available, and one lost a guy, another lost 2 guys, and you revive 1 in 1 squad, and then in the next turn you revive someone else. So a very good stratagem. We'll see how that works out with other strats that Custodes have, if we're going to have enough CP to work with that, because we don't see anything that generates command points for Custodes now, and Custodes are notoriously hungry with CPs. They were in previous editions. That's why we had this ability with Valoris to regen CPs and 5s. We'll see if we have anything like that in 10th edition. And I love the fact that you don't have to be within 3 inches of an objective or have like a special model in the squad and so on and so forth to be able to use it. You just use it on a wounded Custodes squad, and that's it. So that's it, guys. Let me know what you think about the new rules that Custodes have. Are you salty about the leadership and the Valoris like I am? Do you like the new Alaris? Do you like their From Golden Light ability? I personally think that it's awesome, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what their vehicles do, what the Dreadnoughts do, what the regular Custodian Guard do, and a bunch of other things that we don't know yet. So if you like this video, please subscribe, and I will see you next time.